I'm holding in my formerly newsprint ink stained fingertips a letter I received yesterday from an inmate who has suffered, we are reading in the reports, retaliation for contacting members of the press for complaints about his ill treatment in at least two Tennessee State Department of Correction facilities, the latest one being MCCX. It sounds like something out of the Roman Empire, where the galley slaves look at the markings etched in stone on a wall on the other side of the bars, MCCX, which is Morgan County Correctional Complex. And the inmate's name is a rather unusual name. When you read it, you're not sure if it's a man or woman, but the name is Grenda Harmer. And I've come across this name sporadically reading the Post and Email, which is an online publication which has adopted as one of its arguments and one of its reporting lines the prison system in Tennessee. It is based in Connecticut, and the writer Sharon Rondeau has a great deal of contact with the Department of Corrections and the spokeswoman there, and has made efforts to find out what the story is regarding Grenda Harmer and other inmates that are slaves of the state of Tennessee. Now, slavery is allowed in Tennessee. Our Constitution allows slavery. The federal Constitution also allows slavery. Now, private slavery was ended by the war to prevent Southern independence. But we have state slavery, of course, and in the 20th century, the great century of the modern state. Slavery has been a hallmark and a very important feature. The United States has more state slaves per capita than any other nation state in the world, including those run by openly and authoritarian Marxist and communist parties with their red flags and their May Day parades. We have a very high percentage of people in the hundreds of thousands who are enslaved by the state. Now, that's called, in more common parlance, that's called being a prisoner. Right? You're a prisoner of the state, and you are in a prison. Now, a prison, in a way, comes from, there's the verb to imprison, to put behind bars, and the prison is the place where the prisoner is kept. Now, a prisoner, there's a sense where the prisoner is there for a punitive purpose. And when you hear the word slave, you think, well, that person is there producing value for his owner. And these state slaves in Tennessee do not produce any value for their owner, that is to say the state itself, but they are a drain on the taxpayer, that is to say you, my listener. And there's not anything beneficial to them and to the victims of their crimes, if indeed they're there for lawful crimes that are really crimes and not just paper offenses. For those victims, there is no restitution that is in view in the Tennessee judicial system. No victim of a rape, a robbery, a fraud, no surviving member of a family members of a murder victim are in any way compensated. A homicide victim, a manslaughter victim, these families, these survivors, are not compensated by the prisoner, but rather the state, with its august peace and dignity in view, stands only to punish in these systems, these prison systems. They're really slave centers. Now, insofar as Tennessee slaves produce value through the prison industrial complex, which is a very rich system indeed, where profit is made in the billions, I can't say. I've not really read into that. But Grenda Harmer, in correspondence to me, says that there is systemic abuse, and he promises that since his hunger strike didn't bring results, his hunger strike in June and maybe part of July did not bring results, he will continue complaining about abusive treatment at this camp, this very, very rich facility that can hold 2,441 people. Right, it has a capacity in stagnant populations and also rotating populations to hold in confinement. Right, people without liberty, people who are not given any chance to compensate their victims, to create value for themselves and their victims, in abject and inert solitude, and inactivity. That is what happens by and large in Tennessee prisons. There are 120 beds designated in that facility in Morgan County for those who deserve maximum security. And in a letter to, I have a copy of a letter. It's a carbon copy. If you look at it here on YouTube, we are, by the way, the David Tulis Show live here at Nooga Radio. We're live on YouTube, live on Facebook. It's probably a fourth or fifth impression from the letter. It's on pink carbon. It's a little hard to read, though. He has Grenda Harmer has a nice hand. He says that he made a promise that he would be a pain in the side of Commissioner Parker, who is the executive branch appointee. His name is Tony Parker, exposing corruption and staff brutality. He says, I'm a man of my word. Currently, I'm working on proving you and Warden Sean Phillips of engaging in conduct that at minimum violate TCA 41-103. Now that part of the statute, which I have a copy here, my own personal copy of the Tennessee Code, which runs into, I don't know, 25, 30 volumes. I try to invest in worthy things, right? My listener, I'm excited about owning copies of books like this, even though you would say, what a yawner. But the provision that he's citing is the oath of office. And what's odd about this provision is there are no liabilities imposed upon staff and officers of these slave systems. Now, in other words, if you're a warden, a sub-warden, or a man or woman in some kind of authority, there's no penalty for breach, right? There are no list of penalties for you if you breach the rules. If you abuse a prisoner, you take his goods away, you deny him his medications, right? There is no penalty for these offenses. There's not a list of crimes that list aimed against the staff people in the Tennessee Code. The legislature wrote this so that the only recourse that one has is to the oath of office, and that oath, of course, there are two, and that is to perjury. In other words, if you break the rules and you abuse a prisoner, you deny him his medication, or when Grenda Harmer went on a hunger strike, he says in one of the articles published by Sharon Rondeau that he got no medical attention when he had a water and milk packet only hunger strike that lasted 30 days, though it is a debilitating and physically damaging thing to do. He did that to get attention, as often dissenters and people around the world have done in other regimes. They have gone on hunger strike to draw attention to their claims. I know Palestinians often have done that against the occupying Israelis. Now, the statute that he refers to says that I will on no occasion ill treat or abuse any convict under my care beyond the punishment ordered by law or the rules and regulations of the institution. And that is he's not swearing, of course, this to God, so it's not a real oath at all. It's just an affirmation. You swear on yourself, right? There's no value really in that. But the commissioner and the warden swear that they will faithfully and impartially and diligently perform all duties required of me. And Section C of 103 says that the violation of this oath by any officer shall be perjury, punishable as in other cases of perjury. There are two kinds of perjury. Misdemeanor perjury is lying orally, not in a public venue. Let's say lying on a form. That's misdemeanor perjury. If you lie under oath, say in court hearing or a deposition or before a grand jury, that's felony perjury. So here, the only recourse legally, the only penalty that can be held against anybody running the Tennessee government slave system, which I think has 20,000 members, 20,000 subjects, is resort to the penalty. And so he's evoking that provision, and he goes on to say that his aim is to ensure that you and Warden Phillips lose your jobs and are criminally charged. That is what he seeks. But we know that bringing criminal charges for perjury is very difficult. Neil Pinkston had examples of that brought to his attention by David Tulis, here your host at Nooga Radio, and refused to act against two city officers. He goes on to say that he's working on getting certain medical staff nurses fired and their licenses to practice medicine revoked. I'm working on specific staff members who, with Warden Phillips, he says in this correspondence, a copy of which I have received in the mail, are engaged in assaulting inmates and threatening inmates' lives. And he says he's also working on PREA violations that staff are doing toward inmates. And he points out that some state legislators are taking notice of his complaints. And in fact, he somehow heard that I did an interview with Sharon Rondeau, and we did mention Grenda Harmer in our discussion. She was giving me the report about the Tennessee prison system from her offices in Connecticut, where she has covered the Tennessee prisons quite extensively. I would have more on this story at Nooganomics.com if I just had the time to cut and paste and organize my my WordPress website to assist Sharon in gaining readers here in Tennessee. I think there'd be a lot of readers for the Post and Email. It's called the Post and Email, which is a publication online that she has been running for some time. Also, in the correspondence that I received in this hand addressed envelope made out to Mr. David Tulis, host Nooganomics, Hot News Talk Radio, is a letter, a copy of a letter that Grenda Harmer has written to Marina Kudrecki, the Assistant Commissioner of Tennessee Department of Corrections Rehabilitative Services. And he makes reference in this to an inmate, Patrick Oliver, number 548524, whom he says is going to be released sometime before the year is out, early January, and he says without any support system in place to help him. And he is a prime example, Grenda Harmer, this prison inmate, writing to me, wanting your attention. He's wanting your attention on the doings in the state slave system. A prime example of TDOC's failure to ensure inmates are given the help they need not to reoffend. Inmate Oliver, according to him, has no family. They're dead, no place to lay his head, no job prospects, and does not even know where his next meal will come from. Now, here in the next paragraph, there is this rather startling allegation, and that is that this inmate may commit on purpose a crime for the purpose being that he can be rearrested and put back into to prison. Think of your prospects if that's all you have. You don't have a future outside the prison. Prison is all you know. You may have been there for a long time. No details. He says, I personally interviewed this inmate for several hours and am appalled at the lack of services for inmates like Oliver. And each time he mentions his name, he repeats the number. Mr. Oliver, 548521, said he cannot provide a home plan because he has literally no place to go. He'll be maxing out his sentence because, like me, he is sentenced at 100%. So both of these men have prison sentences that cannot be in any way commuted or pardoned or paroled. The state legislature, he says, has prescribed your office with the necessary funding to help inmates like Oliver. Again, the number repeated. What is sad is Oliver is already contemplating committing a crime just so he can come back to prison, where he will have a place to live and food to eat. Mr. Oliver, number so-and-so, informed me that if he starts having a hard time adjusting, that he plans to commit a crime to return to prison. Now, you could say, well, David Tulis, you're just being manipulated, and this man is con man. He's in prison after all, so who is he to be believed? How can you give him any credibility whatsoever? These are good points, and of course, we are like the blog. This is David Tulis, the blogger with the biggest pen in Chattanooga. And when we post a story, we don't know the end of it, right? We don't have the conclusion in view. Sometimes we don't have the feedback that we need, but that is for the next day, right? You do what you can to get the news out, and then you have reaction as you can get it. A transition center, this letter says, is defined as a facility designed to assist in the transition of inmates from prison life back to community, which is guided by specific guidelines and expectations. The legislature gave you money for this. Why is it that inmates like Oliver that are truly institutionalized are not receiving the treatment they need to not reoffend? This is the question that Grenda Harmer is asking, and he has made a file copy and sent copies to others, including the governor and Brian Kelsey, a state senator, and the TDOC commissioner, Tony Parker, and Jeff Sessions, the attorney general. And is asking, will you help this inmate get a place to stay, a job, a home plan, treatment, and whatever else he needs to not reoffend sincerely? That is a question that we ask. The questions, of course, are really greater than these particular cases, and since we're a show about ideas, we want to know why there was a prison system in the first place. Why are there no Christian people who understand that prison is not justice, right? There is no justice in a prison. And that is because in the scriptures, in the Holy Word, the idea of justice is this: there is restitution and there's death. There are provisions in the old Hebrew Republic. There are provisions for people being flogged, or corporal punishment, where there's a quick punishment and it's done with. And there are some countries that use that sort of corporal punishment, quickly admitted. It's not a fine, it's not a penalty, it's just a flogging, and then the prisoner is let go, and it's done with. But the idea in the scripture is that there's restitution. The system of courts and justice are about execution of those deserving death, and there are a set number of capital crimes. They're not, for example, betraying your country. That's not a capital crime, but they would include sodomy, buggery, adultery, and blasphemy. There are several crimes that are given by God to be worthy of death, but others are not. In our country, we have all kinds of crimes, statutory crimes, written up in books like this one, Title 42 of the Code, which has criminal procedure and also correctional institutions among the subjects covered in this book. We have books like this that each one weighs about 5 or 6 pounds. Books and books of laws and all kinds of offenses, and people end up being enslaved to the state. And if we know, let's say that Grenda Harmer was involved in some offense that was not worthy of death, well, biblically, the rule would be that he would be under the supervision of a judge, and he would be making restitution. He would be buying his life back, or he would be buying his limb back. If he had carelessly killed someone by accident in manslaughter, not by murder, then the question would be before the court: what does Grenda Harmer have to pay to buy his life back? That is a question. That is the amount agreed upon. And so if he can agree, and the survivors of the dead man agree, that is what he has to pay. And he pays that by not being in prison. He pays it by doing his occupation, earning his living, and making payments to the family until he's dead, right? And even when he's dead, he may not be able to pay the whole thing off, but he's made that effort, and he has submitted himself to justice, which is to say compensation for the victim. And that is a biblical system. There is no prison in biblical jurisprudence. And he said, well, David, what does biblical jurisprudence have to do with anything? Why do you care? Well, there is only one external source of law that's true. And every man-made source of law, every law that arises from philosophy, from men's systems, from men's ideologies, from men's opinions, cannot be just. By definition, they cannot be just. They in the end are organizations and plays of power by one group against the other. And that power group then defines what's evil and rewards, and those rewards that are for good things. And those invariably are unjust. They're invariably are. How is it that, for example, Tennessee, which has commercialized travel, imposes upon tens of thousands of people in Tennessee a civil death sentence? It says that by saying, well, you can't use your car if you don't have a driver's license. And you have an offense. You haven't paid a debt. We're taking your driver's license from you. You cannot make a living. I'm sorry. You cannot go to the doctor. You cannot make a living. You can take a bike. You can walk. You can maybe take a horse, maybe a scooter, right? A little push scooter. You can take that, but you cannot use a car or truck. And that's a civil death sentence. And we all believe that that's true, that legally that's the way it is. There's no way around it. And we have many, many things which are human systems of oppression. They are, in the end, oppressive systems. Prisons are a system of oppression of those people who do commit real crimes, and those people who commit simulacrum crimes that seem to be crimes, but which are not really offenses against God, in which there's no real victim. And we have many of those. Some of them are administered administratively among people who are still free, ostensibly, walking around on our streets and eating in our restaurants and shopping in the same stores we do. They're not in jail, not in prison. Well, this is David Tulis, and I'm dreading taking this story up because I know it's going to take a lot of my time, but I feel somehow that it's in God's providence that I posted that first story from the Post and email, and now we're going to probably, as things develop, find out more. I'll have calls in to the commissioner and the warden. They were not answering their phones today. It was the wrong time zone for them to pick up, so I couldn't leave a message even at the prison this morning. So we want to find out more about this and have a sense of empathy for these inmates. These men are slaves, right? They are constitutionally and legally enslaved to the state. The state is the great slave master of our day, and if it does any good, I guess we can thank the state for it. And if it does any evil, any injustice, we have the state to frown against. But a question I would ask is, on what basis do we frown against the state for running a prison system such as MCCX, MCCX in Morgan County, where there are up to 2,000 human beings kept behind bars, inert, their time put to no use whatsoever. This is David Tulis, Nooga Radio, 1240 AM, 92.7 FM, live on Facebook and YouTube.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.